A man is now facing 10 years for manufacturing firearms. Let's get into it. So, news just came out today that Dexter Taylor is being sentenced to 10 years in prison after he was found to have an arsenal of more than a dozen ghost guns inside his apartment, according to the DA. For those of you who haven't heard about this, apparently this man, a Brooklyn resident, was 3D printing ghost guns as a hobby. You can surely manufacture your own firearms under the Second Amendment, but New York State has banned that, classifying them as ghost guns. This man wasn't a threat. It has been all over forums that he was a normal guy, wasn't threatening anybody, wasn't planning on harming anybody, was just a hobbyist who decided he wanted to make his own guns. And only because he had purchased parts for his firearms, the ATF and the NYPD busted down his door and arrested him, and he's now facing 10 years in jail. Dexter Taylor was sentenced to spend a decade in prison on Monday after being convicted by a jury in April on a slew of firearms-related charges. Brooklyn District Attorney Eric Gonzalez said that the 53-year-old had ordered a number of ghost gun kits and parts from different online retailers and had them shipped to his home in Bushwick. During a search of his apartment, officers found 4 AR-15 style assault weapons, 5 handguns, 4 rifles, and more than 50 rounds of ammo in an unlocked safe. I have more than 50 rounds of ammo sitting right here on my desk. That's not a whole lot of ammo. I know a lot of people that stack a lot more ammo than that. Gunpowder, shell casing, triggers, a 3D printer, and other parts used to build guns were also uncovered during the search. So here's where it gets a little iffy, is that he didn't have a gun license, and unfortunately, in New York State, you have to have a license to defend yourself if you want to have a pistol. In New York City, it's a lot more challenging than that. You can't even own a gun in the city unless you have special privileges to do so. And now this man, a hobbyist, someone like you or I, is now facing 10 years because he was 3D printing handguns. I don't see that as a bad thing. Him getting sentenced is a bad thing. I don't see him manufacturing firearms as a bad thing. That is protected under our Second Amendment right. This man shouldn't be facing jail time, but because of the laws that we have in this state, he is. This man has 30 years in the software industry, and there is currently a fundraiser where he has already reached almost $180,000. This is just a regular American who just wants to make his own guns as a hobby. Dexter was arrested in New York for assembling legally obtained firearms parts almost 15 years after the Supreme Court ruled that the Second Amendment protects an individual's rights to bear arms. Dexter is a software engineer and he loves building things. A few years ago, he discovered gunsmithing. Quote, "I found out that you can actually legally buy a receiver and you can machine that receiver to completion, and you buy your parts and you put them together and you've got a pistol or a rifle. And once I saw that, I was hooked. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. This is the most cool thing you could possibly do in your machine shop." He was making them because it was fun. He was making them because it was cool, and now he's facing 10 years in jail because of our politicians in this state. During this time, the Supreme Court ruled in New York Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin that the New York State's licensing scheme was unconstitutional. They also ruled that any restriction on firearm ownership that didn't strictly align with the Second Amendment was unconstitutional. Based on this, Dexter continued to assemble legally obtained firearm parts, fully confident that he was in his rights to do so. Unfortunately, the New York State government disagreed. The ATF and NYPD no-knocked raided Dexter's home, breaking down his door and arresting him, and sent him to Rikers Island. Dexter had no prior criminal history. He's being charged for solely exercising his fundamental right to bear arms. Apparently, him and his attorney are fighting the charges, arguing that the laws passed in New York after Bruin are every bit as unconstitutional as the ones that were struck down by Bruin, and that the New York State government is issuing even fewer permits than they did before Bruin. This man had no intentions to cause harm. He wasn't threatening anybody. He's a software engineer. And he thought that manufacturing firearms was a cool thing, much like you and I think. I would love to do that. But now it looks like if we do, we're facing 10 years in jail. You have New York trying to ban Glocks, which I touched on recently. And then now you have this man who had been arrested for manufacturing firearms. So what's next? What's going to be the next big thing in New York State? They're going to try to completely strip your gun rights away from you. They want you to have nothing to protect yourself with, and quite frankly, everything about it is unconstitutional. New York has pulled so many Second Amendment violations over the years and turned around and gone back at it. When is the Supreme Court going to step in and say this is enough? You have all these cases, all these trials, all these court hearings on these types of subjects where New York State is bashed for what they are doing, and yet they continue to do it. You'd think they learned their lesson, but they don't. And unfortunately, this is how things go. There is a legal fund for Dexter Taylor. If you feel like supporting it, I will leave it in the link in the description. Let me know what your thoughts on this. I think it's absolutely crazy that you can't do anything in this state. You can't manufacture your own firearms. The state has turned communist, and as I always say, this is why you see thousands of people leaving this state to go to states like Florida and Texas. Because there you have freedoms, you have rights. Here, they'll simply strip them away from you. And with that, as always, keep on and carry on.